Tonight, before the gods had names, before marble columns rose toward the sky, before poets shaped the heavens into stories, there was only the earth and the sound of the sea. Imagine the coastline of ancient Greece, long before maps, long before temples, long before certainty. The Aegean stretches outward into darkness. Its surface moves in slow, patient rhythm. Waves fold against stone, then retreat again, as if breathing. Above you, the sky opens without boundary. Thousands of stars burn quietly, not flickering in urgency, but steady, distant, unreachable. There is no language yet for constellations, no myth to connect the stars into figures, no story to soften their silence, only the vastness and the feeling of standing beneath it. The air is cool. It carries the scent of salt and wild thyme growing between rocks. Behind you, a small cluster of homes rests in shadow. Low stone walls, thatched roofs, a faint glow of firelight flickering against clay. A shepherd sits awake longer than he meant to. His flock is quiet now. The wind brushes across the hillside. In the distance, a flash of light breaks across the sky. He watches. A pause, then thunder follows. Not gently, not politely, but with force. The ground trembles slightly beneath him. The sheep stir. He does not know the science of storms. He does not know of pressure systems or electricity. He only knows this. The sky can break without warning, and when it does, it feels as though something has spoken, not in words, but in power. He pulls his cloak closer. The wind grows colder. Rain begins to fall. Each drop strikes the earth with quiet insistence. In that moment, standing between darkness and thunder, a thought forms. Not fully shaped, not yet a belief, but a question. Is this random, or is something there? Elsewhere, farther inland, a woman kneels beside a jar of stored grain. Her hands move slowly through the wheat. She measures what remains. The harvest was thin this year. If winter lingers too long, the grain will not be enough. She has seen what hunger can do. She has watched hope diminish like fire at dawn. The seasons do not explain themselves. They arrive, they take, they leave. Indifference is difficult to accept. It is easier to believe that someone watches the fields, that someone decides when rain falls gently and when it withholds itself. The idea is not foolish. It is comfort. Out at sea, a young sailor grips the side of his vessel. The water has shifted unexpectedly. Waves rise higher than they did an hour ago. The wind changes direction without warning. He studies the horizon as if it might answer him. The sea offers no explanation. It can carry him safely to distant shores, or swallow him without hesitation. When he whispers into the wind, he does not feel childish. He feels less alone. This is where mythology begins, not in temples, not in books, but in uncertainty, in the human desire to believe that the world responds. The ancient Greeks did not begin with stories of heroes. They began with sensation, with storms that felt deliberate, with seasons that felt personal, with death that felt abrupt and unjust. The earth could shake without reason. Crops could fail without warning. Illness could move silently through a village. The world was alive, but not yet understood. And when something is alive but not understood, the mind searches for shape. At first, there was no word for chaos. There was only the experience of it. The feeling of standing beneath a sky that offered no guarantees. The feeling of listening to the wind and wondering if it carried intention. Slowly, very slowly, names began to form, not as control, but as comfort. To give a force a name is to make it less frightening. To imagine a presence in the storm is to make the storm less empty. The stars above that dark coastline did not remain anonymous forever. They would one day become hunters, animals, hero, and gods. But not yet, for now, there is only a human being beneath an immense sky. Listening, waiting, feeling small, but refusing to believe that the universe is entirely silent. And in that quiet refusal, in that gentle insistence that meaning must exist somewhere, the first outline of order begins to appear, not loudly, not suddenly, but like the faintest line of light at the edge of dawn. And it is there, in that almost invisible line, that the story of the gods will eventually begin. And that faint line of light did not erase the darkness. It simply gave it contrast. In the earliest imaginings of the Greeks, the beginning was not a battle, not a throne, not even a god. It was a gap, a widening, an opening without boundary. They would later call it chaos. But chaos did not mean disorder, as we might assume today. It meant space, a yawning expanse, an emptiness vast enough to hold everything that had not yet taken shape. Picture it not as noise, but as stillness, not as confusion, but as potential. The shepherd on the hillside did not yet speak the word. The woman counting grain did not yet name the void. The sailor, staring into the horizon, did not yet define the silence. But they felt it. They felt the openness of the world. The sense that before the storm, before the harvest, before life and death, there was something wider than understanding. When the Greeks finally gave that openness a name, they did something subtle and profound. They turned uncertainty into a beginning. Chaos was not an ending. It was the first step. From chaos came shape. From shape came separation. From separation came identity, and identity made the world navigable. Imagine the first time someone spoke the word aloud, chaos. A breath leaving the body, forming a sound that tried to contain the infinite. It was not meant to solve the mystery, only to acknowledge it. In that acknowledgement, the mind found relief. Because a named mystery is less frightening than a silent one. From the vastness of chaos, the Greeks imagined something steady emerging. Not suddenly, not violently, but as if the earth itself slowly pressed upward from the void. They called her Gaia, earth, ground, foundation. If chaos was openness, Gaia was solidity. The shepherd could stand upon her. The woman could plant her seeds in her. The sailor could return to her after long days at sea. In naming the earth, they gave themselves stability, something that did not shift as quickly as weather, something that held memory in its soil, something that endured. But even Gaia did not exist alone, for once the ground was imagined, there had to be something above it, a sky, a ceiling to the vastness. And so the heavens were shaped in thought, not yet as a ruler, not yet as a father, simply as a presence arching over the land. The space between earth and sky became meaningful. It was no longer endless. It was structured, and structure creates comfort. When the world is divided into above and below, light and dark, land and sea, the mind begins to map it. Mapping is a quiet act of courage. It says, this place may be large, but it can be understood in pieces. From chaos came distinction. From distinction came relationship. Earth beneath, sky above, and in between, the fragile human life trying to interpret both. The Greeks did not rush this process. Their myths suggest a slow unfolding, generations rising from what came before. For even the gods would one day be born from earlier forces. But here, in this early imagining, there are no thrones yet, no lightning bolts, no jealous rivalries, only the gradual layering of existence. The shepherd no longer feels entirely lost beneath the storm. For if the sky exists and the earth exists, then perhaps the storm moves between them for a reason. The woman with her grain no longer faces winter alone. For if the earth is a presence, then perhaps the soil remembers her labor. The sailor on the dark sea no longer stares into emptiness. For if sky and earth are real forces, then perhaps the sea also has a nature. Naming does not remove danger. Storms still come. Crops still fail. Ships still sink. But meaning begins to form around those events. And meaning is easier to endure than randomness. As the early Greeks shaped their world through these first ideas, chaos remained in the background. Not gone, not conquered, but framed. It became the space from which all things arise, a beginning rather than a threat. In this way, the first chapter of their mythology was not about power. It was about orientation. Where am I? What stands beneath me? What stretches above me? What lies beyond the horizon? These are quiet questions, but they are foundational. And once those questions were asked, once chaos was acknowledged, once earth and sky were imagined as separate and steady, the next step became inevitable. For if the sky arches above, and if the earth rests below, then who or what moves between them? It is here, in that space between ground and storm, that the idea of generational forces, of powers rising and yielding, will slowly begin to take shape. It is here, in that space between ground and storm, that imagination deepens. For once, the earth has been named, and the sky has been shaped in thought. The mind begins to wonder how they relate to one another. The early Greeks imagined a time when earth and sky were not separate at all, when Gaia, the steady ground beneath every footstep, was closely bound to the vast arch of the heavens. They called the sky Uranus. Not yet a king, not yet a ruler. He's simply the sky itself, stretching endlessly above the earth. In this early vision, earth and sky were joined so tightly that nothing could grow between them. No space, no air, no distance. The world was compressed. Potential existed, but it had no room to breathe. This image may seem distant to us, but imagine soil pressed so tightly against stone that seeds cannot rise. Imagine clouds resting so low that light cannot reach the ground. Growth requires separation, and separation requires change. In the myths that followed, change did not come gently. The union of earth and sky produced offspring, for from their closeness came new forces, the Titans, not yet the familiar Olympian gods, but older beings, embodiments of elements, of time, of depth. They were vast and powerful, and not entirely ordered. Among them was Cronus. But before his name carries weight, pause for a moment. Consider what this stage of mythology represents. And the Greeks were not simply inventing characters, they were describing layers of existence. First, openness, then earth and sky, then forces born from their union. Each layer adds complexity. Each generation moves the world further from silence, yet tension grows as well. In the myth, Uranus feared his own children. He pressed them back into the earth, back into darkness, back into confinement. Again, we can hear symbolism in this image. Potential held down, growth denied, change resisted. The world cannot remain compressed forever. Something must shift. Cronus, one of the Titans, emerges as the force of that shift. Encouraged by Gaia herself, he separates sky from earth, not as a gentle unfolding, but as a decisive act. In doing so, he creates space. Air moves, light enters, distance appears. The world becomes inhabitable. This moment in the myth is often told as violence, but beneath the surface, it is about release. The separation of earth and sky makes life possible. Without space, there is no growth. Without distance, there is no perspective. The shepherd on the hillside now stands beneath an open sky. The woman planting seeds feels air move above her fields. The sailor watches clouds drift freely. The world is no longer pressed tight. It has dimension. Yet every act of change introduces new uncertainty. Cronus, having created space, inherits power. And power brings fear. For just as Uranus feared his children, Cronus begins to fear his own. A pattern begins to form. Generations rising, generations resisting, generations yielding. The Greeks may not have called it psychology, but they understood cycles. They saw in nature that what grows will one day be replaced. Harvest follows planting. Winter follows harvest. Time moves forward even when the heart resists. Cronus becomes associated with time itself. Time that devours. Time that does not pause. Time that eventually overtakes all things. The myth tells us that he swallowed his children to prevent being overthrown. Yet even here, the deeper image remains clear. Nothing can escape succession. Not earth, not sky, not even those who rule. For in the open space created by separation, new forces continue to emerge. The world grows more structured, more layered, more defined. And somewhere within that unfolding, a new generation prepares to take shape. Not from emptiness, not from compression, but from a world that has already learned how to divide and endure. The sky is now high above. The earth is firm below. Time moves between them. And within that movement, a different kind of order waits quietly to be born. And within that movement, a different kind of order waits quietly to be born. Cronus had separated sky from earth. He had created space. He had allowed the world to breathe. But the act that frees the world does not always free the one who performs it. For once power is gained, it must be protected, and protection often turns into fear. The Greeks imagined Cronus as a ruler who looked forward constantly, not toward possibility, but toward threat. He had overthrown his father. He understood what change could do, and so he began to guard against it. In the myth, a prophecy warns him that one of his own children will rise against him. Prophecy in Greek thought is rarely about prediction alone. It is about inevitability, the understanding that time cannot be reversed, that what has happened before will happen again. Cronus responds not by reflecting, not by accepting, but by consuming. Each time a child is born, he swallows them. This image may seem severe, but consider what it represents. Time consumes what it produces. Moments vanish as soon as they appear. Youth fades. Harvests are eaten, as days dissolve into night. To swallow is to prevent growth, to halt succession, to refuse the next chapter. Yet even time cannot control everything. Rhea, the mother of these children, cannot endure the pattern. And here we see another layer of meaning. Resistance to inevitability often comes quietly, not with thunder, but with patience. When her youngest child is born, she hides him and offers Cronus a stone wrapped in cloth. Cronus swallows it without question. The image is almost simple, but beneath it lies something powerful. Time can be deceived, or perhaps time simply moves forward without noticing the small acts that reshape the future. The child who survives is named Zeus. At this stage in our story, he is not yet the wielder of lightning, not yet king of anything. He is simply the possibility that succession cannot be stopped, hidden away, growing in secret, protected until the moment is right. This pattern, father fearing son, son replacing father, is not random. It reflects what the Greeks saw in the natural world. Trees fall and nourish the soil. New growth rises from decay. Leaders age and are replaced. Seasons turn without consultation. Cronus represents a stage of order, but it is an order built on resistance, an order that tries to freeze movement. And nothing in nature remains frozen forever. As Zeus grows, the inevitability of change grows with him. When he returns to confront his father, the conflict is not merely personal. It is generational, it is structural, it is the tension between what was and what must be. The Greeks told of a great struggle, of titans and younger gods clashing in a war that reshaped the cosmos. But we need not linger on the violence, for the deeper transformation lies elsewhere. When Zeus eventually prevails, he does not return the world to compression. He does not bind earth and sky together again. He does not swallow his siblings to prevent rivalry. Instead, he begins to divide power, to assign domains, to establish distance. This marks the true shift from the age of Titans to something new, an order that does not deny succession, but structures it. The shepherd on the hillside now imagines thunder not as a nameless force, but as the voice of Zeus. The sailor feels the sea as something governed, not entirely wild. The woman planting grain believes that the cycle of seasons is held within a pattern. The world becomes layered with intention, not perfectly predictable, but no longer silent. Zeus represents not merely strength, but organization. He does not erase chaos. He contains it. He does not destroy time. He accepts it. The earlier forces, chaos, Gaia, Uranus, Cronus, remain part of the world. They are not forgotten. They become foundations. But above them, a new arrangement begins to settle. The sky stands high, the earth rests firm, time moves steadily, and now, a throne waits at the center of that open sky, not as a symbol of tyranny, but as a symbol of structure. The Greeks were not finished imagining. For once a king is established, questions arise again. If the sky has a ruler, who governs the sea? If thunder has a voice, what of the quiet depths below? The world is no longer compressed. It is no longer chaotic, but it is not yet complete. Division must follow succession. Balance must follow victory. And in the space created by triumph, new realms prepare to be named. And in the space created by triumph, new realms prepared to be named. Zeus had risen. The struggle between generations had settled into stillness. The sky stood open once more. But now it felt organized. The Greeks imagined that after victory, there was no single ruler claiming every domain. Instead, there was division. Not division born of conflict, but division meant to preserve balance. The sky remained with Zeus, but the sea was given to Poseidon, and the shadowed depths beneath the earth to Hades. This act of division is quiet in its symbolism, for it suggests something important. Order is not sameness. It is structure. The shepherd on the hillside looks upward during a storm and thinks of Zeus. But when he walks along the shore and feels the salt spray on his face, he thinks of another presence. The sea does not move like the sky. It surges, it swells, it shifts unpredictably. To imagine it governed by a different force is to recognize its unique character. Poseidon does not sit on Olympus as calmly as Zeus. He moves with the tides. He embodies motion. The Greeks, living beside the water, understood its temperament. Ships were built of wood and hope. Trade depended on wind. Survival depended on safe passage. To assign the sea its own ruler was to acknowledge its independence. And then there was the realm below. The earth had been named. The sky had been raised. The sea had been recognized. But what of death? What of the place where the living eventually travel? The Greeks did not imagine a place of fire and punishment. They imagined a continuation, a shadowed region beneath the surface, quiet, unavoidable, ruled not by cruelty, but by inevitability. Hades was not thunderous. He was not tempestuous. He was steady. The same way the grave is steady, the same way night arrives without malice. By dividing the world into sky, sea, and underworld, the Greeks accomplished something subtle. They mapped existence. Above, between, below, 3 layers, 3 presences, 3 domains that touched every human life. The shepherd depends on sky and rain. The sailor depends on wind and tide. The farmer depends on soil, and eventually surrenders to earth again. The division was not about hierarchy alone. It was about orientation. Where am I standing? What force moves around me? What lies beneath my feet? Once these realms were imagined, the world felt less overwhelming. Not because danger disappeared. Storms still shattered trees. Waves still overturned ships. Death still came quietly in sleep. But each event now belonged somewhere. Belonging brings clarity. Clarity brings calm. Zeus did not control the sea. Poseidon did not rule the dead. Hades did not command the storm. Power was limited, and limitation is the beginning of balance. This structured cosmos marked the true end of the earliest age. Chaos had been framed. Earth had risen. Sky had been separated. Time had moved through succession. And now, authority had been distributed. The Greeks had imagined a world that reflected their own communities. Villages had leaders. Ships had captains. Families had elders. Roles created stability. Stability allowed growth. Yet, even within structure, human emotion remained. Zeus might rule the sky, but he still felt anger. Poseidon might command the tides, but he still carried restlessness. Hades might govern the dead, but he remained distant, reserved, untouched by sunlight. The gods were not abstractions. They were recognizable. The Greeks did not create perfection. They created familiarity. For what use is a ruler who cannot be understood? A storm feels more real when it resembles a temper. A sea feels more alive when it mirrors mood. An underworld feels less terrifying when it is ruled by a presence that simply performs its duty. With the world divided, attention began to turn toward relationships. How do these realms interact? What happens when sea meets sky, when earth meets death, when thunder crosses water? Structure does not eliminate movement. It channels it. And in that channeling, the next stage of imagination quietly prepares itself. For once realms exist, once rulers are recognized, once authority feels defined, the question shifts again. If the guides govern the world, how do they govern themselves? And what happens when emotion enters power? And what happens when emotion enters power? The Greeks understood something quietly profound. Authority does not erase feeling. A king may hold a throne, but he still carries desire, still carries anger, still carries doubt. Zeus ruled the sky. He commanded thunder. He divided the world. But he did not become distant from emotion. The storm itself reflects this truth. It gathers slowly. It darkens the horizon. It releases force, and then it clears. Power, in Greek imagination, was never cold. It was alive. To imagine Zeus without feeling would have made him abstract, and abstraction offers little comfort. Instead, the Greeks gave their gods recognizable traits: jealousy, affection, impatience, pride. not to diminish them, but to understand them. A shepherd who feels anger during a dispute can look at the sky during thunder and think, even the ruler above knows this fire. Emotion becomes shared, and what is shared is less isolating. Consider the sea. When Poseidon stirs the waters into restless waves, it mirrors something familiar, restlessness itself. The sailor who grips his vessel does not see cruelty. He sees temperament. The sea is not evil, it is moody, and moods pass. This subtle mirroring allowed the Greeks to project their inner world onto the outer one, not in chaos, but in pattern. If the sky can rage and then calm, so can a human heart. If the sea can churn and then grow still, so can grief. Even the underworld held emotional resonance. Hades did not shout. He did not strike with lightning. He remained steady, reserved. In this, the Greeks saw another reflection, the quiet acceptance that follows loss, the stillness that settles after mourning. The gods were not flawless, they were expressive, and expression suggests movement. Movement suggests change. Even rulers are not fixed. And if rulers can feel, then the structure of the cosmos is not rigid stone. It is something living, something breathing, something capable of tension and resolution. This idea carries weight, for a world ruled by emotion is not predictable, but it is understandable. You cannot command a storm, but you can wait for it to pass. You cannot control the tide, but you can study its rhythm. You cannot prevent death, but you can accept its inevitability. In imagining gods who felt deeply, the Greeks created a cosmos that moved in cycles. Anger rises, anger falls, love appears, love fades, loss descends, hope returns. The shepherd beneath the thunder does not feel abandoned. The storm is not meaningless. It belongs to a force that resembles him. The sailor does not feel mocked by the sea. He understands its temperament. The farmer does not curse the soil when harvest fails. She believes the pattern will shift again. Emotion within power makes the universe relatable, and relatability softens fear. Yet this choice carries another consequence. If gods feel jealousy, they may compete. If gods feel pride, they may challenge one another. If gods feel desire, they may disrupt balance. Structure does not eliminate tension, it reframes it. The Greeks did not seek a static paradise. They imagined a world in constant negotiation. Sky meeting sea, sea meeting earth, life meeting death, emotion meeting authority. And in that negotiation, human life finds its place. For if even the rulers of the cosmos must manage feeling, then struggle is not failure, it is participation. The sky may thunder, the sea may surge, and the underworld may wait, but beneath all of it, the pattern continues. Emotion rises, emotion settles, and order, though never perfect, remains. From here, a deeper question emerges. If gods can feel, can they be trusted? And if they cannot be fully trusted, how do humans live within their world? And if they cannot be fully trusted, how do humans live within their world? The Greeks answered this question not with certainty, but with ritual. If the gods could feel anger, then anger had to be respected. If they could feel pride, then pride had to be acknowledged. And if power existed above the clouds, then words spoken beneath the sky carried weight. Imagine two farmers standing at the edge of a narrow field. A line of stones marks the boundary between their land. Over time, those stones have shifted. Rain has moved them. Animals have brushed against them. Now the line is uncertain. They could argue, they could fight, but instead they stand facing one another beneath the open sky. One raises his hand, he swears, not merely to the other man, but to Zeus. The sky becomes witness. Thunder does not strike. Lightning does not flash. Yet the weight of the oath settles in the air. For to swear falsely is to invite imbalance. The Greeks believed that broken promises did not simply harm relationships. They disturbed order. And when order is disturbed, consequences follow. Not always immediately, not always dramatically, but inevitably. This belief created structure within daily life. Merchants swore fairness. Leaders swore loyalty. Citizens swore allegiance. The act of speaking became sacred. Words were not light things. They traveled upward. They were heard, or at least they were imagined to be heard. And imagination shapes behavior. A sailor preparing to depart might offer a vow to Poseidon, safe passage in exchange for tribute, a promise given in humility, not because the sea could be controlled, but because relationship could be acknowledged. Even the underworld had its own boundaries of oath. To swear by the river Styx was to bind oneself completely. The river represented finality, irreversibility. Once crossed, there was no return. So too with certain promises. They could not be undone without consequence. These rituals did not remove danger. Storms still came. Crops still failed. Life still ended. But they created the sense that humans were not passive. They participated in the balance. They aligned themselves with order rather than resisting it. And alignment offers peace. The shepherd who once feared thunder now listens to it differently. It is not merely noise, it is authority. Authority that responds to respect. The farmer who once feared winter now plants with prayer. Not desperation, not panic, but acknowledgement. The sailor who once feared the sea now studies its rhythm. He honors its unpredictability without assuming cruelty. The world remains uncertain, but it no longer feels arbitrary. There is structure, there are rules, there are consequences, and within that framework, humans find stability. Yet structure alone cannot quiet every question, for if oaths are needed, it means trust is fragile. If rituals must be performed, it means imbalance is always possible. The Greeks did not imagine a perfectly secure universe. They imagined one that required maintenance, like a field that must be tended, like a ship that must be repaired, like a relationship that must be honored. Power in the sky did not guarantee harmony below. It invited responsibility. And responsibility requires awareness. Awareness of boundaries. Awareness of consequence. Awareness of one's own limitations. As the early Greek world settled into this structured cosmos, a subtle transformation occurred. The gods were no longer only forces of nature. They became participants in moral order. To break an oath was not merely to lie, it was to disturb the pattern. To disturb the pattern was to invite correction. This belief wove itself into daily life. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. And steady belief creates cultural endurance. From chaos to earth, from earth to sky, from sky to division, from division to law, the progression is quiet but deliberate. Each layer adds definition, each addition reduces fear. Yet, even with law, even with oaths, even with divided realms, another tension remains. If gods feel emotion, and if humans rely on their balance, what happens when emotion overwhelms structure? It is here, at the edge of stability, that the world will turn once more. It is here, at the edge of stability, that the world begins to tremble again. For structure, no matter how carefully imagined, is never untouched by feeling. The Greeks knew this well. They lived in small communities. They saw how quickly harmony could shift into rivalry, how pride could disrupt agreement, how desire could disturb balance. And so, they allowed their gods to experience the same tensions. Zeus ruled the sky. He upheld oaths. He preserved division between realms. Yet even he was not immune to longing. Stories grew around his affections, not to entertain alone, but to reveal something human. Power does not silence desire. Authority does not erase impulse. When lightning flashes unexpectedly across a calm horizon, it reminds the shepherd that even stability contains sudden energy. The Greeks did not imagine a ruler without complexity. They imagined one capable of misjudgment, capable of favoritism, capable of love that unsettles equilibrium. And in response, other gods reacted. Jealousy arose, not as chaos, but as friction. Hera, often associated with marriage, represents this friction, not as fury alone, but as wounded expectation. When trust is strained, structure feels fragile. The storms of emotion do not shatter the sky, but they ripple through it. Poseidon, too, could grow restless. The sea does not remain calm because it has been assigned a ruler. Waves still rise. Currents still pull unseen beneath the surface. Restlessness is part of its nature. To deny it would be false. The Greeks did not smooth away these tensions. They preserved them. Because a world without tension is not believable, and believability creates endurance. Imagine again the farmer standing at the edge of her field. She has sworn her oath. She has planted with care, but a neighboring village claims part of her land. Anger flickers. Even within structure, conflict appears. She does not abandon her belief in order, but she recognizes that order must be defended. The same applies to Olympus. Rivalries among gods do not dissolve the cosmos. They animate it. They create narrative. And narrative makes the universe feel alive. Yet notice something subtle. Despite jealousy, despite rivalry, despite wounded pride, the sky does not collapse. The sea does not swallow the land entirely. The underworld does not rise to engulf the living. Tension exists, but containment remains. This is the difference between chaos and order. Chaos is unbounded uncertainty. Order allows disturbance without destruction. The Greeks seem to understand that emotion is not the enemy of balance. Uncontained emotion is. So their myths show gods who feel deeply, but who ultimately remain within a larger pattern. The shepherd beneath thunder no longer sees random fury. He sees passion, passion that moves across the sky, then dissipates. The sailor watching waves no longer interprets turbulence as endless threat. He reads it as mood, and mood passes. The world remains structured. But that structure breathes, it bends, it absorbs tension. It does not shatter at the first sign of strain. This is perhaps one of the quiet strengths of Greek mythology. It does not promise perfection, it promises continuity. The gods may argue, they may compete, they may intervene in mortal affairs with imperfect judgment. Yet the larger frame endures. Sky above, sea between, earth below, underworld beneath. The pattern holds, and as long as the pattern holds, humans can live within it, even when harvest fails, even when storms linger, even when promises strain. Emotion tests order, but it does not erase it. From this understanding, a deeper realization begins to form. If the gods reflect human feeling, and if humans reflect divine pattern, then perhaps the boundary between them is thinner than it first appears. It is this subtle connection between mortal life and divine structure that prepares the ground for the next transformation. For if the cosmos mirrors human struggle, then the human soul itself may carry something sacred. And once that thought emerges, the story shifts from the heavens above to the heart within. Chapter 3. When the earth grew quiet. And once that thought emerges, the story shifts, not upward but downward, from the open sky to the soil beneath bare feet, from thunder to silence. The Greeks lived close to the earth, closer than we do now. Their survival did not depend on distant markets or unseen supply lines. It depended on fields, on rain, on sunlight, on timing. A harvest too early could spoil. A harvest too late could rot. Rain that lingered too long could drown seedlings. Rain that failed to come could harden soil into dust. Imagine walking through a field after the harvest has ended. The stalks have been cut low. The ground is scattered with brittle remains. The air smells dry. There is no green, only stubble, only earth. The shepherd who once watched storms now walks across that quiet land. He feels the emptiness differently. A field without growth is not simply bare, it is vulnerable. The woman who counted grain now opens her jar and measures carefully. Each handful taken brings the level lower. There is no certainty that spring will come in time. Hunger was not theoretical. It was remembered. It had faces. It had names. In such a world, winter is not decorative. It is a threat. Cold settles slowly across the hills. The wind changes tone. The sun lingers for shorter hours. Shadows lengthen. The earth seems to withdraw into itself. To live through this season required more than hope. It required belief in return, and belief in return requires a story. The Greeks imagined that when the fields grew silent, It was not random decline, it was absence. Something had withdrawn, something essential had stepped away. They gave that absence a shape, not to dramatize it, but to explain it. They imagined a daughter, young, connected to the earth, a presence tied to growth. When she was there, the fields flourished. When she was gone, the soil hardened. Notice how gentle this explanation is. It does not accuse the sky. It does not curse the sea. It does not blame humanity. It simply recognizes loss. A mother waiting at the edge of a field understands absence instinctively. When a child does not return at dusk, the air feels different. The house feels larger. The silence grows heavier. The Greeks translated this feeling into their landscape. When crops failed, the earth itself was grieving, not in rage, but in quiet withdrawal. Demeter, associated with grain and fertility, became the embodiment of this sorrow. But here, let us not rush into conflict. Let us remain in the field. The wind moves gently over dry soil. There is no anger, only stillness. The shepherd walks home earlier now. The animals move less. The nights grow longer. The stars appear sharper in the cold air. Even the sky seems distant. Winter does not shout. It settles. It reduces sound. It slows movement. In this slowing, humans are forced inward. Food must be rationed. Stories must be told by firelight. Patience must replace urgency. The Greeks understood that growth and absence are bound together. If a daughter disappears into shadow, the earth mirrors that descent. But notice something essential. The myth does not end with disappearance. It introduces rhythm. For what withdraws may also return. The empty field is not proof of abandonment. It is part of a pattern. Seeds lie hidden beneath frost. Roots sleep below the surface. The soil rests, and rest is not the same as death. This distinction matters deeply. To believe that winter is permanent would be despair. To believe that winter is cyclical is endurance. The Greeks chose endurance. They imagined absence as part of a larger design, not as punishment, not as chaos, but as interval. The shepherd standing in a barren field does not feel comfort immediately, but he carries memory. He remembers green, he remembers growth, and memory becomes a bridge between loss and return. In this way, the myth of disappearance is less about tragedy and more about patience. The earth grows quiet, not destroyed, not forsaken, simply waiting. And in that waiting, a deeper understanding begins to form. If the land itself moves in cycles, then perhaps the human heart does as well. And once that parallel is seen, the story prepares to descend further into shadow. And once that parallel is seen, the story descends further, not into chaos, but into shadow. The Greeks did not imagine loss as an explosion. They imagined it as absence, a space where something once was, a pause in the rhythm. Demeter, associated with grain and harvest, was not a distant figure in their imagination. She was present in every loaf of bread, in every handful of wheat, in every season that turned from green to gold. When the fields flourished, she was near. When the fields failed, she felt distant. The myth tells us that her daughter disappeared. But listen closely. It is not the manner of disappearance that matters most. It is the waiting. A mother searches the horizon. She listens for footsteps. She looks for familiar movement among familiar hills. The door does not open. The voice does not return. And so, she wanders. In Greek imagination, Demeter walks the earth in grief, but grief here is not loud. It is withdrawing. It is the refusal to nourish. When sorrow becomes heavy, even the earth feels it. Fields do not bloom. Seeds hesitate beneath the soil. The wind moves, but without promise. This is not anger. It is sorrow turned inward. The Greeks understood something subtle. When humans suffer loss, their world narrows. Color fades, sound dulls, food tastes different. Time stretches. By giving Demeter grief, they gave nature empathy. The earth mirrors the mother, and the mother mirrors the earth. The shepherd who once feared thunder now fears stillness. No storm comes, no rain falls. The sky remains pale and distant. The woman who measures grain counts more slowly now. Each handful removed from the jar feels heavier than before. The sailor senses change in the air. Even the sea seems quieter, as if holding its breath. The disappearance of a daughter becomes the disappearance of abundance. Not because the gods punish humanity, but because loss reshapes the world. In this telling, there is no villain emphasized, only separation, only distance, and distance creates longing. The Greeks did not imagine that sorrow could be avoided. They imagined that sorrow must be endured. Demeter does not immediately regain what was lost. She searches, she calls. She refuses to resume her place until something changes, and in that refusal, winter deepens. The fields grow harder. The sun lingers lower in the sky. Human life slows. Notice how gently this unfolds. There is no sudden destruction, only gradual quiet. The myth becomes an explanation for a season every Greek knew intimately. The time when growth withdraws. The time when survival depends on what was stored before. But even in sorrow, the possibility of return remains. For absence is not emptiness, it is interruption. The daughter does not vanish into nothing. She moves elsewhere, into depth, into shadow, into a realm that belongs to another order of existence. And so the story links grief with descent. The earth above grows silent while something below continues. Life is not erased, it is relocated. The Greeks imagined that part of her would remain beneath the surface, part above. This division introduces rhythm. Not permanent loss, but shared time. Months in shadow, months in light. The shepherd standing in a frozen field does not yet see green, but he has seen it before. Memory sustains him. The woman holding her jar of grain does not abandon hope. She measures carefully. She waits. The sailor watches the horizon with patience. He has known calm before. He trusts its return. Demeter's grief does not destroy the world. It slows it. It teaches endurance. It reveals how deeply human emotion is tied to survival. When something precious disappears, life does not stop. It becomes quieter, more deliberate, more attentive, And in that quiet, something essential forms: patience. Patience is not passive, it is active waiting. The earth beneath frost is not dead, it is resting. The daughter in shadow is not erased, she is transitioning. The Greeks did not deny sorrow. They integrated it. They made it seasonal. They gave it a place in the pattern, and by doing so, they softened its permanence. For winter, no matter how long, contains within it the promise of change. And change, in Greek thought, is never sudden. It approaches slowly, like the first faint warmth beneath frozen soil. It is there, beneath the silence, that the next movement quietly prepares to rise. It is there, beneath the silence, that stillness deepens. Winter does not arrive in a single moment. It settles gradually. The mornings grow colder first. Breath becomes visible in the air. Water stiffens at the edges of streams. Grass loses its softness. The shepherd rises before dawn and feels the frost beneath his sandals. The animals move more slowly. The hills appear muted. Even sound seems thinner. The Greeks understood that winter is not dramatic. It is persistent. It reduces motion. It shortens days. It encourages waiting. In their myth, this quiet persistence reflected Demeter's sorrow. But again, notice the tone. The earth does not rage. It does not crack open. It simply withholds bloom. Seeds lie beneath the soil, intact but inactive. Roots remain coiled in darkness. Sap retreats within the trees. Life contracts. And contraction is not destruction. It is preservation. The farmer, who once walked her field with urgency, now walks it with stillness. There is nothing to plant, nothing to harvest, only preparation. She repairs tools, she stores grain. She watches the sky. Waiting becomes a discipline. The myth gives shape to this discipline. If Persephone spends part of the year beneath the earth, then the earth mirrors her. If she moves in shadow, then growth pauses above. The Greeks did not describe this as punishment. They described it as rhythm, half in light, half in dark, a balance between presence and retreat, for without retreat, there is no renewal. The shepherd notices that the stars shine brighter in winter, and the sky clears more often. Cold air sharpens the view of constellations. The same sky that once carried storms now feels distant and still. Winter simplifies the world. Color fades, movement slows, attention narrows. In that narrowing, humans turn inward. Stories grow longer beside the fire, voices lower, thought deepens. The Greeks may have seen in this inward turning a reflection of the underworld itself. Not terrifying, not chaotic, but interior. A place beneath surface activity. The myth of descent mirrors the seasonal descent. Above ground, the fields wait. Below ground, life continues unseen. This unseen continuation is essential, for it preserves hope without demanding proof. The farmer cannot see the seed beneath frozen soil, but she trusts its presence. Trust becomes the bridge between absence and return, and trust is quieter than certainty. Winter teaches this. It teaches restraint. It teaches humility. It reminds the shepherd that not every season is meant for movement. The Greeks, in shaping this myth, were not avoiding reality. They were observing it closely. They saw that despair comes when loss feels permanent. So they made loss cyclical. They gave it duration, but not eternity. The fields do not bloom in winter, but they do not die forever. The mother does not recover her daughter all at once, but she does not lose her entirely. This partial return creates continuity. Continuity sustains survival. Even in the coldest weeks, there is preparation. Firewood stacked carefully, food rationed thoughtfully, clothing layered against wind. Life narrows, but it does not end. In this narrowing, the Greeks may have sensed a deeper truth. That growth requires pause. That abundance requires contrast. That light is understood more clearly after darkness. The season that refuses to bloom is not hostile. It is necessary. Without winter, spring would be ordinary. Without absence, presence would feel incomplete. The shepherd standing in frost does not celebrate the cold, but he endures it. He counts the days subtly. He notices the slightest change in the air, a faint warmth at midday, a subtle shift in wind. These small signs become signals of return. The myth prepares for that return without rushing it, for if hope arrives too quickly, it does not feel earned. Winter must linger long enough to teach patience. Patience must deepen long enough to create gratitude. And when the first hint of green finally breaks through the soil, it will not be taken for granted. It will be recognized as renewal. The earth remains quiet now, but beneath that quiet, movement gathers. Not visible yet, not audible, but certain. And certainty, when carried gently, becomes faith. It is from this slow certainty that the next season begins to rise. It is from this slow certainty that the first change becomes visible, not in thunder, not in proclamation, but in subtle warmth. The shepherd feels it first in the air. The cold does not vanish overnight, but it loosens. Morning frost thins. The wind carries a softer edge. The light lingers a little longer on the hills. The farmer kneels beside her field. The soil no longer resists her touch. It yields slightly beneath her fingers. There is moisture where before there was frost. She waits, not with impatience, but with practiced attention. And then, a small green curve presses upward through the earth. It is not dramatic, it is fragile, but it is undeniable. In Greek imagination, this is the return. Persephone rising from shadow, not permanently, not entirely, but partially, a shared arrangement. Months above, months below, light divided, time divided, presence divided. The beauty of this myth lies not in reunion alone, it lies in balance. Demeter's sorrow does not disappear, it softens. The fields respond gradually. Green spreads carefully across the land. Blossoms follow with hesitation. The shepherd watches grass return to the hillside. The animals lift their heads more often. Movement increases. The farmer plants again. Not because she has forgotten winter, but because she remembers it. Memory deepens gratitude. The Greeks did not imagine spring as victory over winter. They imagined it as continuation. One part of the pattern returning, while another waits below. The underworld remains. Shadow remains. But light expands its share. This arrangement reflects something essential. Nothing in the world belongs entirely to one state. Joy is not constant. Sorrow is not eternal. Growth does not eliminate rest. Rest does not prevent growth. The myth offers reassurance without denying complexity. The shepherd no longer fears that winter will consume the year. The farmer no longer believes that frost means finality. The sailor senses new winds rising from warmer waters. Life resumes its outward motion. But beneath that motion is a deeper awareness. The return is temporary. And that temporariness is not tragic. It is rhythmic. By dividing the year between light and shadow, the Greeks preserved both. They did not attempt to abolish darkness. They integrated it. They did not deny loss. They made it seasonal. In doing so, they created resilience. For resilience depends on expectation of change. The shepherd expects the grass to fade again. The farmer knows the jar will one day empty. The sailor understands that calm seas will one day stir. Expectation softens shock, and softened shock is easier to endure. As green spreads across the land, as warmth returns to stone, as birds circle once more above the fields, the world feels alive again. But it is a wiser aliveness. It carries memory. The Greeks saw in this cycle a quiet instruction. Do not cling too tightly to abundance. Do not despair too deeply in absence. Both are part of the whole. Demeter rejoices, but her joy is measured. Persephone smiles, but she knows she will descend again. The earth blooms, but it remembers frost. This memory is not burden, it is depth. Without depth, beauty is shallow. Without contrast, light is ordinary. The first green after silence feels miraculous because silence came before it. The shepherd walks across the hillside and feels the difference beneath his feet. The ground is softer. The air smells faintly of growth. He does not celebrate loudly. He simply breathes easier. The farmer plants her seeds with steady hands. She does not assume certainty. She assumes participation. The sailor pushes his vessel from shore with renewed confidence. The wind feels cooperative again. Life continues, not in triumph, but in rhythm. And in that rhythm, a realization forms quietly. If the earth itself moves in cycles, if light and shadow share the year, if sorrow and joy take turns, then perhaps the human soul is shaped by similar patterns. Perhaps descent is not the end. Perhaps return is written into the structure of existence. It is this thought, gentle and persistent, that prepares the path for the next story. Not of fields, not of seasons, but of the inner life, of tasks, of trials, of a soul learning to move between light and shadow. It is this thought, gentle and persistent, that turns the story inward. The fields have bloomed. The seasons have revealed their rhythm. Light and shadow have taken turns. Now, the question changes. If the earth moves in cycles, does the human heart do the same? The Greeks had a word for something subtle within us. They called it Psyche. Today, we often translate it as soul, but the word once meant breath. The invisible air that leaves the body at the final moment. Breath is quiet. It cannot be held in the hand. It cannot be seen. And yet, without it, life ceases. To describe the soul as breath is to describe it as movement. Inhale, exhale, presence, release. The Greeks did not separate the body from this breath entirely. They understood that thought, emotion, desire, and fear moved through the body like wind. Invisible, but powerful. Imagine the shepherd once more. He stands beneath the sky. Thunder rolls in the distance. His heart quickens. His breath changes. He feels something stir within him that cannot be touched. This stirring, this interior motion, is Psyche. It is not only life, it is awareness of life. The farmer kneels in her field. She watches a seed break through soil. Something lifts inside her. Relief, gratitude, hope. None of these can be measured, yet all are felt. The sailor watches the horizon at dawn. Light spreads slowly across the water. He feels quiet anticipation, a sense of beginning. That sensation is also Psyche. The Greeks imagined that when the body dies, the breath leaves, it descends, not violently but naturally, as evening follows afternoon. The underworld was not merely a location beneath the earth. It was continuation in another form. Psyche traveled. It did not vanish. And if the soul continues, then its experiences matter. The story of Psyche as a figure in myth emerges later, but before that tale unfolds, the concept must settle. The Greeks sensed that human life is not defined only by action. It is shaped by endurance, by patience, by reflection. The shepherd does not control the storm, but he chooses how to stand beneath it. The farmer cannot command the seasons, but she chooses how to prepare. The sailor cannot calm the sea, but he chooses how to navigate it. Choice belongs to Psyche. It is the inner response to outer events. The myths of gods and seasons prepare the stage, but now the focus narrows. From cosmos to consciousness, the Greeks understood that survival required more than ritual. It required inner strength. Not loud heroism, but quiet persistence. The kind that waits through winter. The kind that rises after loss. The kind that accepts that descent is part of growth. Psyche represents this journey. Not the journey across land, but the journey within. Just as Persephone moves between light and shadow, the soul moves between confidence and doubt. Just as fields alternate between bloom and barrenness, the heart alternates between clarity and confusion. The Greeks did not separate outer myth from inner life. They mirrored one in the other. If Zeus governs the sky, and Demeter governs the fields, then something must govern the interior world. That governance is not domination, it is awareness. Awareness of fear, awareness of longing, awareness of mortality. To possess Psyche is to feel deeply, to endure feeling without being consumed by it. The shepherd cannot stop the storm, but he can remain standing. The farmer cannot prevent winter, but she can ration wisely. The sailor cannot command the tide, but he can adjust his sail. In each of these small decisions, the soul acts, it learns, it strengthens. The Greeks would eventually tell the story of Psyche as a woman who must complete difficult tasks. But before we enter that tale, pause here. Consider the pattern already formed. Chaos became space. Space became earth and sky. Earth and sky gave rise to succession. Succession led to division. Division led to order. Order revealed emotion. Emotion required law. Law endured tension. Tension softened into rhythm. Rhythm revealed cycle. And cycle turned attention inward. The soul, like the seasons, does not remain in one state. It changes, it learns, it descends, it rises. If the Greeks were right, then the journey of the soul is not separate from the movement of the world. It reflects it. And once that reflection is recognized, the stage is set for a story of trial, not a battle for power, not a war of generations, but a quieter struggle. The struggle to grow without losing oneself, to descend without disappearing, to return with greater understanding. It is here, in this inward space, that the next chapter begins to unfold. It is here, in this inward space, that the trial begins. The Greeks told a story of Psyche not only as breath, but as a young woman, curious, human, capable of doubt. Her name, meaning soul, was not accidental. Through her, the Greeks explored what it means to mature, to grow, to endure difficulty without hardening. In the tale, Psyche is given tasks, not simple errands, but challenges that require attention, patience, discernment. The first task appears almost ordinary. She must sort a vast heap of mixed seeds, wheat with barley, poppy with lentil, grain with grain, a mountain of indistinguishable shapes. Imagine standing before such a pile, each seed small, each similar. The sun lowering in the sky, time limited. At first glance, the task seems impossible, but consider what it represents. Life presents us with confusion, emotions mixed together, desire intertwined with fear, hope entangled with doubt. To mature is to learn to distinguish, to separate impulse from intention, to separate reaction from response. The shepherd standing beneath thunder must distinguish between danger and imagination. The farmer watching clouds must discern between passing shadow and gathering storm. The sailor adjusting his sail must differentiate between current and wind. Sorting seeds is an image of clarity, not dramatic, not heroic, but essential. The Greeks understood that the soul grows not only through grand battles, but through careful attention, to look closely, to pause, to choose deliberately. In the myth, small creatures assist Psyche. Ants, quiet and persistent, move through the heap. They separate grain with patience. This detail matters. Growth does not always require force. Sometimes it requires humility. Sometimes it requires help. The shepherd cannot read the sky without experience. The farmer cannot predict seasons without memory. The sailor cannot navigate alone without guidance from stars. Clarity often arrives through steady effort. The first task of the soul is not conquest. It is perception, to see what is truly present, to recognize what belongs and what does not. Sorting seeds becomes sorting thoughts, sorting fears, sorting desires. The pile appears overwhelming, but when divided carefully, it becomes manageable. The Greeks were not teaching efficiency. They were teaching awareness. awareness that chaos can be organized through attention. Not all confusion is permanent. Some confusion requires patience. As Psyche completes this task, she does not become stronger in body. She becomes steadier in mind, and steadiness is the beginning of wisdom. The shepherd who once feared storms now observes patterns. The farmer who once dreaded winter now anticipates its return. The sailor who once panicked now studies the horizon calmly. Clarity changes behavior. It reduces panic. It replaces reaction with intention. The Greeks may have sensed that the greatest battles are not always visible. They unfold quietly within the self. Sorting seeds is a metaphor for sorting experience. We gather moments across a lifetime, some painful, some joyful, some confusing. If left in a heap, they overwhelm us. But when examined, when understood, they form pattern. And pattern creates meaning. Psyche's first task does not end at the trial. It prepares her. For clarity is required before deeper descent. Just as the earth must rest before it blooms, the soul must focus before it transforms. The shepherd's breath slows as he studies the sky. The farmer's hands steady as she plants. The sailor's grip relaxes as he adjusts to wind. These small shifts reflect inner change. The Greeks saw no separation between outer life and inner trial. Each mirrors the other. And as Psyche lifts the final seed into its proper place, a quiet confidence settles. Not pride, not triumph, but readiness. For the next task will require more than clarity. It will require patience in the face of waiting. For the next task will require more than clarity. It will require patience at the edge of fear. After the seeds were sorted, Psyche is given another challenge. She must gather golden wool from a field of wild rams. These rams are not gentle creatures. They are fierce. Their horns are sharp. Their movements sudden. To approach them carelessly would be dangerous. At first, the task seems to demand bravery, perhaps even force. But the deeper lesson is different. The soul does not grow by rushing into harm. It grows by recognizing timing. Imagine the shepherd watching a restless flock. He does not step forward when the animals are agitated. He waits. He studies their rhythm. He moves when movement is wise. The farmer does not plant seeds in frozen soil. She waits for warmth. The sailor does not fight a rising storm head-on. He adjusts course. He seeks calmer water. In the myth, Psyche is advised to wait until evening, when the heat fades, when the rams grow quiet, when their energy settles. Only then can she gather the golden wool caught in branches. Notice the difference. She does not defeat the rams. She does not conquer them. She waits for stillness. Patience becomes protection. This lesson is subtle. Often, we believe courage means action, but the Greeks suggest that courage may also mean restraint, to pause, to observe, to allow intensity to pass before engaging. The shepherd beneath thunder does not climb the hill during the lightning. He waits for the storm to move. The farmer does not argue with frost. She stores grain and waits for thaw. The sailor does not shout at wind. He studies it. He moves with it when possible. Golden wool glimmers in sunlight. It is beautiful, valuable, but difficult to obtain without wisdom. The soul's second task is to approach desire carefully. Not every shining thing must be seized immediately. Not every challenge must be confronted directly. Patience is not weakness. It is strategy aligned with rhythm. The rams eventually calm. Their energy fades as evening cools the field. Psyche walks quietly among the branches. She gathers what is left behind. Effort remains, but danger has lessened. This pattern echoes nature. The sun rises fiercely at noon, but softens at dusk. The sea churns at times, then lies flat under moonlight. Emotion rises in intensity, then settles into reflection. To wait for the settling is to respect rhythm. The Greeks understood that life cannot be controlled, but it can be timed. The shepherd who once feared storms now reads clouds with calm awareness. The farmer who once panicked at drought now measures her reserves wisely. The sailor who once rushed into open water now studies currents patiently. Through this second task, the soul learns something essential. Not all strength is forceful. Some strength is quiet endurance. Some strength is knowing when not to move. The golden wool is not taken by aggression. It is gathered through alignment with stillness. Perhaps the Greeks were teaching that inner turmoil cannot always be confronted head-on. Sometimes anger must cool. Sometimes fear must diminish on its own. Sometimes longing must soften before clarity appears. The soul that rushes into every impulse becomes exhausted. The soul that waits gains perspective. Perspective reduces harm, and harm avoided preserves energy for deeper trials. As Psyche completes this task, she does not feel triumphant. She feels steadier, more observant, less reactive. Her breath slows. Her movements grow deliberate. The shepherd returns home after a long day. The farmer closes her gate at dusk. The sailor anchors his vessel before nightfall. Each act reflects the same quiet discipline. Clarity was the first lesson. Patience is the second. Together, they prepare the soul for something more demanding. For soon, descent will be required. Not into a field, not into a storm, but into shadow itself. For soon, descent will be required. Not into a field, not into wind or storm, but into depth. After learning clarity, after learning patience, Psyche is given another task. She must gather water from a dark and distant source, a river that flows from a high cliff, cold, dangerous, difficult to reach. The path upward is steep. The air grows thinner, the ground unstable beneath her feet. This is no longer a matter of sorting carefully or waiting quietly. It is a matter of ascent and risk. Imagine climbing toward a sound you cannot fully see. Water echoing in stone, mist rising faintly. The shepherd has walked such difficult slopes before. He knows how easily a foot may slip. The farmer has carried buckets from distant wells. She knows the weight of necessity. The sailor has faced currents that pull downward beneath the surface. He knows depth is not always visible. The river Psyche must reach is not gentle. It is guarded. It moves with force. The myth tells of creatures warning her of danger. The water is not meant for careless hands. It represents something guarded, something profound. Water in Greek imagination is often boundary. Rivers divide land. Rivers define direction. The river, Styx, divides the living from the dead. To approach sacred water is to approach transition. This task symbolizes confronting what lies at the edge of safety, not recklessly, but deliberately. The soul must one day face depth. It must confront fear of falling, fear of loss, fear of uncertainty. But notice again, Psyche does not leap blindly. She is aided. An eagle carries her vessel to the source. The eagle moves where she cannot. It sees from above. It navigates air where footing is impossible. This detail is gentle but important. The soul does not grow alone. Sometimes help arrives from perspective, from a view wider than our own. The shepherd climbs only so far. He knows when to turn back. The farmer knows when to ask for assistance from neighbors. The sailor relies on stars when the sea obscures direction. Perspective prevents destruction. The eagle gathers the water without falling. Psyche receives it. She does not claim mastery over the river. She receives what is needed. The lesson deepens. Clarity taught attention. Patience taught timing. Now descent teaches humility. Not every danger must be overcome by force. Some must be approached with guidance. The river continues to flow. It is not conquered, it is respected. The Greeks saw rivers as passage. Crossing them means entering another state. Even standing beside them means acknowledging transition. The shepherd standing near a stream hears movement beneath still water. The farmer watering her crops knows life depends on controlled flow. The sailor understands that currents beneath the surface shape the visible tide. Depth influences surface. The soul that ignores depth remains shallow. The soul that descends wisely returns changed. Psyche holds the vessel carefully. Water gathered from a dangerous height. It is not heavy, but it carries meaning. She has approached risk without surrendering to it. She has accepted assistance without shame. She has confronted depth without drowning. The shepherd once feared what he could not see. Now he listens to it. The farmer once feared uncertain seasons. Now she plans around them. The sailor once feared hidden currents. Now he studies them. Through this third task, the soul learns that courage is layered. It includes clarity. It includes patience. It includes humility before depth. The world above continues. Fields grow. Seasons turn. But beneath the visible rhythm, inner transformation unfolds. Psyche has not yet completed her trials, but she has moved closer to the center of herself, closer to understanding that descent is not destruction. It is preparation, and soon she will be asked to descend further still, not toward a river, but toward the underworld itself, and soon descent will deepen, not toward a cliff, not toward a river, but toward shadow itself. The final task given to Psyche requires her to travel to the underworld, not in death, but in courage. She must enter the realm beneath the earth and return. The Greeks understood that every human life contained such a descent. Moments when light recedes, when certainty fades, when one must walk forward without clear horizon. Imagine the shepherd traveling through a valley at dusk. The hills block the sun, the air cools quickly, shapes blur into shadow. He does not stop walking, he moves carefully. The farmer enters a storage room where grain is nearly gone. She counts in dim light. She faces scarcity without panic. The sailor passes through fog. The shoreline disappears. He navigates by memory and instinct. These are small descents, but they mirror the larger one. Psyche's journey to the underworld is not filled with battle. It is filled with instruction. She is told to carry coins for passage, bread for the guardian. She must not be distracted. She must not accept comfort offered along the way. This is important. Descent demands focus. If one lingers too long in shadow, return becomes uncertain. The underworld in Greek thought is not chaos. It is structure and silence. Rivers flow there. Shadows move. Memories remain. It is a realm of stillness. Psyche enters it not to remain, but to retrieve something. This retrieval matters deeply. To descend intentionally is to seek understanding, not to escape life, but to deepen it. The shepherd who walks through night learns the shapes of the land without sunlight. The farmer who survives winter learns the weight of patience. The sailor who endures storm learns humility before force. Descent teaches depth. In the underworld, Psyche receives a small box. She is told not to open it. It contains a portion of beauty, or perhaps a portion of rest. The instruction is clear: do not look inside, do not disturb what is sealed. But curiosity lingers. The soul is rarely free from temptation. Even after clarity, even after patience, even after humility, the box becomes a symbol. There are mysteries meant to remain closed. There are experiences meant to unfold in their own time. When Psyche opens the box, she falls into deep sleep. Not death, but stillness. An exhaustion that follows overreaching. The Greeks may have understood that growth is not linear. Even after wisdom, mistakes occur. Even after strength, weakness appears. The shepherd sometimes misreads the sky. The farmer sometimes plants too early. The sailor sometimes misjudges wind. To fall is not failure, it is part of rhythm. Psyche's sleep mirrors winter once more. A pause, a suspension. But not the end, for descent does not conclude in darkness. Return is written into the pattern. Help arrives again. She awakens, not as she was before, but steadier. Having faced shadow directly, having walked among silence, having tasted the limits of curiosity. The Greeks did not romanticize descent. They did not celebrate it, but they acknowledged its necessity. Without underworld, there is no renewal. Without shadow, light lacks depth. The shepherd emerging from valley sees the stars differently. The farmer emerging from winter touches soil with gratitude. The sailor emerging from fog reads the coastline with relief. Psyche rises from shadow with understanding. Not perfection, but resilience. She has sorted confusion. She has waited with patience. She has approached danger with humility. She has descended and returned. The soul that can descend without being lost can transform. And transformation is not sudden. It is layered. It accumulates quietly, like seasons turning, like fields resting, like breath moving in and out. The trial of the soul does not end in spectacle. It ends in integration. Light and shadow held together. Experience and awareness woven into one. And from this integration, a quieter realization begins to settle. Perhaps immortality is not endless life, but enduring wisdom. Perhaps immortality is not endless life, but enduring wisdom. After descent, after error, after return, Psyche does not stand in triumph. She stands in quiet completion. The Greeks did not describe her transformation with thunder. They did not surround it with spectacle. Instead, they allowed it to unfold gently. Through trial, the soul changes shape, not in body, but in awareness. Imagine the shepherd who once feared every dark cloud. Now he studies them calmly. He knows some will pass without rain. He knows some will gather slowly before breaking. His heart still beats faster when thunder rolls, but fear no longer governs him. Imagine the farmer who once counted grain with trembling hands. Now she measures with steadiness. She has known scarcity. She has known return. Her hope is quieter, but stronger. Imagine the sailor who once tightened every rope with anxiety. Now he ties them with confidence, not because the sea is tame, but because he has endured it. This is transformation, not the absence of challenge, but the presence of understanding. In the myth, Psyche is ultimately united with the divine presence. She is no longer merely mortal. She is granted immortality. But consider what that means. Immortality in Greek thought is not simply endless time. It is integration into lasting order. To become immortal is to become aligned with pattern. Psyche's trials have shaped her perception. She no longer reacts blindly. She no longer rushes into danger. She no longer opens every sealed mystery. She has learned rhythm, and rhythm creates harmony. The Greeks did not suggest that suffering disappears after wisdom arrives. They suggested that suffering changes meaning. The shepherd still faces storms. The farmer still faces winter. The sailor still faces shifting tides. But each now understands that descent is temporary, that return follows silence, that patience carries reward. Transformation without noise is the deepest kind. It does not announce itself. It does not demand recognition. It reveals itself in behavior, in tone of voice, in steadiness of breath, in the ability to endure uncertainty without losing direction. The myth of Psyche mirrors the seasons once more. Spring does not shout. It emerges gradually, leaves unfold quietly, warmth settles slowly. In the same way, wisdom arrives without spectacle. The Greeks may have sensed that the greatest victories are invisible. They occur within. They accumulate across time, clarity, patience, humility, descent, return. Each layer builds upon the last. Psyche's transformation does not erase her humanity, it deepens it. She understands both light and shadow. She has moved between them, and in that movement she has learned balance. Balance is not stillness, It is adjustment, constant, subtle adjustment. The shepherd adjusts his stance against wind. The farmer adjusts planting to weather. The sailor adjusts sail to current. The soul adjusts to circumstance. This is the quiet art of living. The Greeks did not promise freedom from sorrow. They offered pattern instead. Pattern reassures. Pattern suggests continuity. If winter returns, spring will follow. If descent occurs, return remains possible. Immortality, then, is not escape from the cycle. It is participation in it with awareness. Psyche's journey does not conclude in spectacle. It settles into harmony. Her trials are complete, but growth does not end. Growth continues as long as breath continues. And breath was always the meaning of her name. Inhale, exhale, presence, release, light, shadow, movement, rest. The trial of the soul has unfolded quietly, from outer cosmos to inner depth, from chaos to consciousness, from fear to resilience. Now, the story prepares to widen once more. For once the soul has been shaped. Attention turns again to the symbols that remain in the world. Symbols carved in stone, symbols worn on shields, symbols carried through centuries, and in those symbols, memory continues to speak, and in those symbols, memory continues to speak. Long after storms have passed, long after harvests have been gathered, long after stories of descent and return have settled into tradition, images remain, carved into stone, painted on pottery, etched into shields. The Greeks understood that stories may fade in detail, but symbols endure. One of the most enduring is the face of Medusa, a face with serpents for hair, eyes wide, expression fixed. At first glance it seems monstrous, terrifying, unnatural. But consider its placement. The image of Medusa was often worn on armor, placed on doorways, engraved upon temples, not hidden, displayed. Why would a frightening face be chosen as protection? Because fear, when faced directly, loses some of its power. The shepherd who once feared thunder now watches the sky calmly. The farmer who once feared winter now prepares for it wisely. The sailor who once feared deep water now navigates it with care. Medusa's gaze turns those who look upon her into stone. But the deeper meaning may not be punishment. It may be reflection. To be turned to stone is to be halted, frozen in place, unable to move forward blindly. Fear stops us, but fear also warns us. The Greeks did not deny fear, they gave it a face. By placing that face on shields and walls, they transformed fear into guardian. The Gorgonine, the image of Medusa's head, became a protective emblem. It said to the world, "We know terror. We recognize it. We are not pretending it does not exist, and in recognizing it, we claim power over it." The shepherd, standing beneath lightning, no longer feels paralyzed. He knows storms pass. The farmer facing drought does not surrender immediately. She seeks solutions. The sailor caught in sudden wind does not abandon hope. He adjusts. Medusa represents the moment fear becomes visible. Visible fear is easier to confront than invisible anxiety. The Greeks carved her face into stone deliberately. Stone does not decay quickly. Stone endures. Fear acknowledged becomes stable. It loses chaos. It gains boundary. The myth of Medusa also contains transformation. She was not born monstrous. She became so. Her story speaks of change through violation and curse. But what endured was not her suffering alone. It was her image. An image repurposed into protection. This repurposing matters. The Greeks did not erase what frightened them. They integrated it. They placed it at thresholds, at gates, at beginnings. To cross a threshold is to enter unknown space. Fear often guards the unknown. By placing Medusa at the doorway, they acknowledge this truth. The shepherd opening his gate at dawn does not know what the day will bring. The farmer planting seeds does not know if rain will come. The sailor leaving shore does not know the sea's mood. Uncertainty remains, but fear is no longer shapeless. It has form, and form allows relationship. When Perseus defeats Medusa, he does not destroy her power entirely. He carries her head as protection. Again, a fear transformed into shield. The Greeks may have sensed that what we conquer can also guard us. Lessons learned through difficulty become wisdom. Wisdom protects. The shepherd who once feared every shadow now recognizes harmless shapes. The farmer who once trembled at early frost now understands its limits. The sailor who once panicked at rough water now reads its rhythm. Fear faced becomes strength. Strength tempered becomes resilience. Medusa's face remains fixed in stone, not to terrify endlessly, but to remind that beneath courage lies awareness of danger, that beneath growth lies memory of struggle. The Greeks carried their symbols forward not as decoration, but as condensed story. Within a single carved image lived centuries of meaning. Storm, winter, descent, return, fear, integration. The soul, shaped by trial, recognizes symbols differently, not as superstition, but as memory preserved. And memory, when held gently, guides the future. From here, the story widens once more, beyond one face, beyond one emblem, toward the enduring presence of myth itself, toward the enduring presence of myth itself. Long after individual stories faded, long after specific names blurred in the minds of those who listened, symbols remained. They were carved into temples, painted onto pottery, pressed into coins, woven into fabric. They became part of daily life. A farmer might not recount every detail of a god's genealogy, but she would recognize the shape of a torch, the curve of a trident, the coiling of a serpent. Symbols compress story. They carry memory without requiring explanation. The Greeks understood that memory must be visible to endure. A temple column rising against the sky was not only architecture, it was declaration. The sky above and the earth below were still in relationship. A trident carved near the harbor reminded sailors that the sea was powerful, but not nameless. An image of grain etched into stone honored the rhythm of seasons. Symbols allowed continuity without constant retelling. The shepherd, walking past a carved relief, felt connected to something older than his own lifetime. The farmer grinding wheat beneath a symbol of abundance felt part of a cycle larger than herself. The sailor touching an emblem before departure felt steadier, not because danger vanished, but because memory stood beside him. Memory transforms fear into familiarity. Familiarity reduces chaos. Chaos, once named, once shaped, once symbolized, becomes story, and story becomes culture. The Greeks lived in a landscape filled with reminders. Mountains associated with gods, rivers tied to mythic journeys, caves believed to open into shadowed realms. Their world was layered. Every hill carried echo. Every coastline held narrative. This layering gave depth to ordinary experience. The shepherd did not see a random mountain. He saw a place of origin. The farmer did not see mere soil. She saw blessing and loss intertwined. The sailor did not see open water alone. He saw history carried in wave and wind. Symbols are anchors. They fix meaning to location. They bind time to space. Without symbols, stories dissolve into abstraction. With symbols, they become tangible. A carved stone outlasts the storyteller. A painted vase outlasts the voice. A temple outlasts the generation that built it. The Greeks were not unique in creating symbols, but they were deliberate in preserving them. They understood that human memory fades, but carved memory persists. When children asked about the images, elders responded, not with lectures, but with stories. Stories told by firelight. Stories told at harvest. Stories told before sailing. In this way, myth did not remain distant. It entered routine. The shepherd herding at dusk repeated phrases he had heard from those before him. The farmer planting in spring murmured quiet acknowledgments. The sailor casting off from shore touched a symbol before stepping aboard. These small acts wove myth into life, and woven things are stronger than loose threads. Symbols also evolve. Medusa's face once frightened, then protected. Over time, its meaning layered further. Fear became caution. Caution became awareness. Awareness became wisdom. The Greeks allowed meaning to deepen without erasing the old layers. This flexibility preserved relevance. A rigid symbol cracks, a layered symbol endures. The world changed around them. Cities rose, wars came and passed. Philosophers questioned, poets reinterpreted. Yet the symbols remained, not frozen, but adaptable. The shepherd's grandson may not have believed every tale as his grandfather did, but he still recognized the image. The farmer's daughter may have heard new interpretations, but she still planted in rhythm. The sailor's apprentice may have studied navigation differently, but he still respected the sea. Myth, when reduced to symbol, becomes portable. It travels through time. It survives reinterpretation. It invites reflection. The Greeks did not seek to preserve myth unchanged. They preserved its core, pattern, cycle, balance, transformation. Symbols whisper these truths without demanding belief. They offer continuity, and continuity stabilizes culture. The shepherd beneath the night sky still feels small, but he does not feel alone. The farmer facing winter still feels uncertainty, but she does not feel abandoned. The sailor staring at the horizon still feels risk, but he does not feel chaos, because memory stands beside them, carved, remembered, integrated. and from this enduring presence of symbol, a final reflection begins to rise. What remains when temples fall and stones erode? What remains when temples fall and stones erode? The Greeks built in marble. They carved columns to touch the sky. They shaped statues with careful hands. They believed that beauty honored order. And yet, stone weathers. Wind wears down edges. Earthquakes fracture pillars. Empires shift. Cities change. Temples do not last forever. The shepherd's hillside outlasts the shrine built upon it. The farmer's field remains fertile long after walls crumble. The sailor's coastline persists, though harbors alter shape. Structures fade, but pattern continues. When a temple collapses, the sky does not vanish. The sea does not retreat. The seasons do not halt. The rhythm endures. The Greeks may have sensed this. They knew that even their own monuments would not stand eternally. So they embedded meaning not only in stone, but in story. Story travels differently than marble. It requires no foundation. It needs only memory. A shepherd can carry story across hills. A farmer can whisper it while planting. A sailor can repeat it beneath stars. Story moves where stone cannot. When temples fall, myth remains in language, in metaphor, in gesture, in habit. The image of Medusa may fade from a doorway, but the idea of facing fear persists. The name of Demeter may be spoken less often, but the understanding of seasonal rhythm remains. The tale of Psyche may shift in detail, but the pattern of trial and transformation continues. The Greeks built physically, but they also built conceptually. They constructed frameworks for interpreting experience. Those frameworks do not collapse with stone. They adapt, they resurface, they reappear in new forms. The shepherd generations later may no longer invoke Zeus by name, but he still reads the sky as meaningful. The farmer, centuries later, may not speak of Persephone, but she still trusts in the return of spring. The sailor far in the future may not carve tridents on ships, but he still respects the sea's rhythm. Meaning evolves. Pattern persists. The Greeks did not imagine their myths as static relics. They allowed reinterpretation. Philosophers questioned the literal. Poets reshaped the narrative. Dramatists reimagined conflict. Yet, beneath variation lay continuity. Chaos as beginning. Order through separation. Emotion within power. Cycle through loss and return. Trial leading to transformation. Symbols preserving memory. These ideas do not require temples. They require reflection. When stone crumbles, memory condenses. It becomes proverb. It becomes metaphor. It becomes quiet understanding carried across generations. The shepherd who once feared thunder teaches his child to observe clouds calmly. The farmer who endured winter teaches patience to her daughter. The sailor who survived a storm teaches humility to his apprentice. This teaching is myth in motion, not carved, not fixed, but living. Temples may fall, but breath continues, and breath, as the Greeks once said, is soul. Psyche does not erode, it transforms. As long as humans feel fear, they will create symbols. As long as humans experience loss, they will imagine return. As long as humans confront uncertainty, they will search for pattern. In this way, Greek mythology did not end with ancient Greece. It dispersed, it folded into language, into philosophy, into art, into quiet reflection about existence itself. The shepherd beneath the same stars feels connected to those before him. The farmer beneath the same sun feels continuity. The sailor beneath the same horizon feels history beneath the waves. What remains when temples fall, not marble, not column, but orientation, an understanding of place within a vast world. Above, below, between, light, shadow, breath, release. The Greeks gave shape to these contrasts, and shape, once imagined, is difficult to erase. As the final light fades behind distant hills, as stone cools in evening air, as memory lingers longer than monument, one last reflection begins to settle. Perhaps mythology was never about gods alone. Perhaps it was always about being human beneath the stars. Perhaps mythology was never about gods alone. Perhaps it was always about being human beneath the stars. The shepherd who watched thunder thousands of years ago stood beneath a sky not so different from ours. The constellations shifted slightly, the names changed, but the vastness remained. He felt small, we still do. The farmer who waded through winter counted days by sunlight and frost. We still measure time by seasons. We still watch for signs of return. The sailor who studied the horizon felt both hope and uncertainty. We still stand at edges, of oceans, of decisions, of futures not yet formed. The Greeks told stories to orient themselves within immensity. They were not escaping reality, they were interpreting it. Chaos became beginning. Separation became structure. Structure allowed life. Emotion tested balance. Loss introduced rhythm. Trial shaped the soul. Symbols preserved memory. This pattern is quiet, but enduring. Even when belief shifts, pattern remains. The language of gods may fade in literal meaning, but the questions persist. Why does suffering exist? Why does change unsettle us? Why does loss hurt so deeply? Why does hope return even after disappointment? These questions are older than temples, older than marble, older than carved stone. The shepherd felt them before he had words for them. The farmer felt them before they were written down. The sailor felt them before poetry formed around them. The Greeks did not invent these questions. They gave them shape, and shape makes uncertainty less overwhelming. Tonight, as you imagine that ancient coastline, as you picture wind moving over water, as you sense stars scattered across dark sky, you participate in the same reflection. You stand beneath vastness. You feel both fragility and continuity. Your breath moves in and out. Inhale, exhale, presence, release, psyche. The soul, shaped by experience, does not eliminate difficulty. It learns to hold it gently. Winter does not disappear from the year, but it no longer feels endless. Storms do not vanish from the sky, but they no longer feel personal. Descent does not cease to occur, but it no longer feels like annihilation. The Greeks framed existence as cyclical, not linear toward perfection, but circular toward understanding. Chaos to order, order to tension attention to rhythm, rhythm to growth, growth to descent, descent to return, return to memory, memory to symbol, symbol to story, story to reflection, and a reflection back to the human heart. Perhaps that is what remains when temples fall, not stone, but perspective. A way of seeing the world as layered rather than random, as patterned rather than chaotic, as meaningful even when meaning is incomplete. The shepherd beneath thunder did not know science, but he sensed structure. The farmer in winter did not know meteorology, but she trusted return. The sailor at sea did not know global maps, but he navigated by stars. Knowledge changes form. Pattern remains. The Greeks gazed upward and imagined stories among the stars. We gaze upward and see galaxies and light years. Yet the feeling of smallness is the same. And with smallness comes wonder. Wonder does not require belief in literal gods. It requires openness. Openness to mystery. Openness to pattern. Openness to the idea that human life is part of something larger. Perhaps immortality was never about endless existence. Perhaps it was about continuity of meaning. The shepherd's question echoes in us. The farmer's patience echoes in us. The sailor's humility echoes in us. We inherit more than story. We inherit orientation. Above us, the sky still stretches. Beneath us, the earth still holds. Between them, breath continues. And as long as breath continues, the soul moves. It learns. It descends. It returns. It remembers. And in remembering, it finds calm beneath vastness. The stars do not answer directly. They never did, but they invite reflection, and reflection is enough. From this quiet understanding, the night deepens gently, the sea grows softer, the wind settles, and the ancient questions rest beside you, not as burdens, but as companions, and reflection is enough. The night deepens now. The sea that once carried storms moves in softer rhythm. The hills that once echoed with thunder rest beneath starlight. The temples may have fallen. The names may have shifted. But something quieter remains, inheritance, not of marble, not of carved relief, but of perspective. The Greeks did not pass down certainty, they passed down orientation, an understanding that life unfolds in patterns, that suffering is not singular, that joy is not permanent, that descent is not final. This inheritance does not require belief in a particular sky god or harvest goddess. It requires recognition of rhythm. The shepherd, standing alone beneath a vast sky, learns humility. The farmer, tending fragile shoots, learns patience. The sailor, navigating shifting waters, learns adaptability. These are not mythic qualities alone. They are human ones. The Greeks wrapped them in story so they could be remembered. Story travels further than instruction. It touches emotion. It lingers in imagination. When a child hears of winter as a season of return, fear softens. When a listener hears of descent as part of transformation, darkness becomes less absolute. When someone sees fear carved into stone as guardian rather than enemy, courage feels possible. Perhaps that is the quiet genius of these myths. They do not deny reality. They interpret it. They do not eliminate hardship. they frame it. Framing does not erase pain, but it contains it. The shepherd once framed thunder as voice rather than randomness. The farmer framed absence as interval rather than abandonment. The sailor framed the horizon as invitation rather than threat. Framing allows endurance, and endurance becomes tradition. Generations shift. Empires rise and fall. Languages transform, yet certain metaphors persist. Storm as emotion. Winter as grief. Spring as renewal. Descent as trial. Return as growth. These metaphors no longer require explicit myth. They live within speech, within art, within quiet thought. When someone says, "This too shall pass," they echo ancient rhythm. When someone speaks of weathering a storm, they echo sky and sea. When someone describes a dark night of the soul, they echo descent and return. The Greeks may not recognize every modern expression, but they would recognize the pattern beneath it. Chaos to order, loss to rhythm, trial to transformation, symbol to memory, memory to reflection. The shepherd beneath the stars felt small, yet connected. We still do. The farmer facing uncertainty felt fragile, yet hopeful. We still do. The sailor staring at horizon felt both fear and anticipation. We still do. Perhaps mythology was not meant to be frozen in literal belief. Perhaps it was meant to evolve with understanding. The Greeks themselves reinterpreted their stories. Philosophers sought allegory. Poets reshaped emphasis. Dramatists explored contradiction. Myth was never static. It breathed, like Psyche. Breath in, breath out. Presence, release. This quiet inheritance does not demand worship. It invites contemplation. It suggests that meaning can be cultivated, that pattern can be recognized, that fear can be faced, that loss can be integrated, and that transformation rarely arrives with noise. The night is steady now. The stars no longer feel distant. They feel familiar, as if they have been watched by countless eyes before yours. They have. The same sky held shepherd and sailor alike. The same constellations guided countless journeys. What remains, when stone erodes and temples fade, is this shared gaze upward, a human being beneath vastness, breathing, wondering, searching for pattern, finding it gently and resting within it. From here, the story softens further. Not toward new myth, but toward stillness, toward the quiet closing of a circle that began with wind and stone. Toward stillness. The story loosens its edges. Names begin to fade, not because they are forgotten, but because they are no longer needed in the same way. Long after Zeus was imagined in thunder, long after Demeter was felt in the fields, long after Psyche descended and returned, the sky continued to open above human lives, and the earth continued to turn. The shepherd who once whispered to the wind did not require every story to remain unchanged. He required only orientation, a sense that the world, however vast, was not entirely without pattern. As centuries passed, beliefs shifted, languages changed, empires rose and dissolved into memory, temples weathered, statues lost their faces. Yet the morning still arrived slowly over hills, and evening still settled with the same quiet certainty. There's something deeply calming in the persistence of rhythm. Even when names fade, cycles remain. The Greeks may have spoken of gods. Others would later speak of forces, of principles, of science, of nature. But the experience of standing beneath the sky did not alter. The feeling of smallness remained, the sense of wonder remained, the breath entering the lungs remained. If mythology once gave thunder a name, it also gave humans permission to look upward without despair. And perhaps that permission is what endured most strongly. The farmer, walking through a quiet field at dusk, does not need to recite lineage of deities to feel connected to the soil. The sailor, watching stars unfold across dark water, does not need carved emblems to feel guided. Connection has become internal. The symbol has moved inward. Where once stone carried memory, now awareness carries it. The world without names is not empty, it is spacious. Like the early idea of chaos before it meant disorder. Open, unbounded, full of potential rather than fear. When names soften, pattern reveals itself more clearly. Storm follows heat. Winter follows harvest. Night follows day. Breath follows breath. There is comfort in inevitability when inevitability is cyclical. The shepherd no longer trembles at every rumble of distant thunder. He recognizes sound as movement within a system. The farmer no longer despairs at the first sign of frost. She sees it as part of transition. The sailor no longer reads the sea as enemy or ally. He reads it as rhythm. This is what remains when myth releases its literal shape. Not abandonment, not disbelief, but integration. The ancient stories dissolve gently into perception, into language, into quiet assumptions about how the world moves. Perhaps the Greeks understood something subtle that extends beyond their era, that humans cannot live comfortably within randomness. We seek pattern instinctively. We search for meaning even when none is declared. Myth once offered that pattern in narrative form. Now pattern appears in observation, in reflection, in contemplation. The sky still darkens before rain. The sea still swells before storm. The soil still rests before bloom. And the human heart still descends before rising again. In this way, myth does not vanish. It changes language. It becomes quieter, less dramatic, more interior. The shepherd beneath the stars does not speak aloud as often. He listens more. The farmer does not ask for intervention. She watches for signs. The sailor does not demand protection. He studies current and wind. The world without names is not stripped of wonder. It is filled with subtler awe, an awe that does not depend on figures in the sky but on the vastness itself. And vastness, when approached gently, does not intimidate. It invites humility. The breath continues. Inhale. Exhale. The earth turns. The sea moves. The sky expands. And within that movement, human life unfolds quietly, not separate from pattern, but woven into it. The stories have softened now, but their rhythm remains, and rhythm is enough, and rhythm is enough. When the noise of names settles, when the sharp outlines of legend grow softer, what remains is not emptiness, but a quiet human need to understand our place within something vast. The Greeks once described the sky as ruled by a presence. They described the sea as governed by temperament. They described the earth as capable of grief and renewal. But beneath these descriptions lay something even simpler. They were asking, where do we stand, and how do we endure? The shepherd standing alone at dusk does not require a full theology to feel awe. He needs only the fading light and the steady rhythm of his own breath. The farmer kneeling in soil does not require cosmic explanation to sense connection. She needs only the warmth of sun and the memory of previous harvests. The sailor staring at a distant horizon does not need divine genealogy to recognize risk and wonder intertwined. He needs only wind, water, and awareness. Myth once shaped these experiences into story. Now experience itself carries the structure. Storm is still intense. Winter is still cold. Spring is still gentle in its arrival. Descent still feels heavy. Return still feels relieving. We may no longer imagine Olympus above the clouds, but we still feel the rise and fall within ourselves. And perhaps that was always the point. The gods were mirrors. They reflected human emotion onto the sky so that emotion could be understood without shame. Anger thundered. Grief froze the field. Desire stirred the sea. Hope rose with morning light. In time, these metaphors became interior. We speak now of storms within, of emotional winters, of personal descents. The language has changed, the pattern has not. The human shape of meaning remains consistent. We look outward to understand inward experience. We look inward to interpret outward events. This exchange between world and self is ancient. The shepherd learns himself by watching clouds. The farmer understands patience through seasons. The sailor understands humility through horizon and tide. These lessons are not confined to a single culture, but the Greeks articulated them with particular clarity. They allowed contradiction to coexist with order. They allowed imperfection to coexist with divinity. They allowed sorrow to coexist with renewal. This allowance created spaciousness, and spaciousness reduces fear. A rigid worldview fractures under pressure. A flexible one bends. The myths bent. They absorbed reinterpretation. They survived skepticism. They survived translation. Because they were never only about literal beings in the sky. They were about human orientation within vastness. When the shepherd lies down after a long day, he does not calculate cosmology. He listens to night sounds. He feels fatigue in his body. He senses the sky above him. He rests. The farmer, after storing grain and closing her gate, sits quietly beside the dimming light. She thinks of tomorrow, but she does not rush toward it. She allows evening to arrive. The sailor, after anchoring in calm water, leans against wood worn smooth by time. He watches the last color fade from the horizon. He breathes. Meaning does not always announce itself. It settles slowly. It accumulates through repetition, through noticing, through living. Perhaps immortality was never about escape and death. Perhaps it was about continuity of insight. The shepherd's patience echoes in us. The farmer's endurance echoes in us. The sailor's humility echoes in us, and in that echo myth persists, not as doctrine, not as command, but as orientation. Above us, space remains vast. Beneath us, earth remains steady. Between them, breath continues its quiet rhythm. Inhale, exhale, light, shadow, movement, rest. The human shape of meaning is simple. It seeks balance. It accepts cycle. It learns through descent. It grows through return. And in the soft repetition of these patterns, calm gradually replaces confusion. The ancient stories have not vanished. They have dissolved gently into awareness. And awareness, when held without strain, is a form of peace. From here, only quiet remains to be deepened. The circle nearly closed. The breath nearly settled. The night nearly complete. And within that nearness, rest approaches softly. And within that nearness, rest approaches softly. The circle that began with wind and space has slowly drawn inward, from chaos without form to earth and sky divided, from thunder and sea to harvest and winter, from descent into shadow to the shaping of the soul, from symbols carved in stone to quiet awareness carried within. Nothing has rushed. Nothing has shattered. Everything has unfolded as pattern tends to unfold, gradually. The Greeks may not have imagined that their stories would travel this far. They may not have foreseen how language would change, how belief would shift, how marble would erode beneath centuries of weather. But perhaps they sensed something deeper. That if a story mirrors human experience honestly, it will not disappear. It will adapt. It will soften. It will find new forms of expression. The shepherd beneath the sky does not need Olympus to be visible to feel humility. The farmer does not need a goddess standing in the field to understand renewal. The sailor does not require a trident carved at the harbor to respect the sea. The essential gestures remain: looking upward, listening carefully, waiting patiently, returning after descent. The circle closes not with conclusion, but with recognition. Recognition that life is layered, that change is constant. That stability exists not in permanence but in rhythm. Even breath teaches this. Inhale cannot last forever. Exhale must follow. Neither is superior. Both are necessary. The Greeks once described the cosmos as structured, divided, governed. Yet within that structure, emotion moved freely. Love, jealousy, grief, hope. They allowed their gods to feel because they themselves felt. And by allowing feeling into the cosmos, they removed shame from it. Storm was not moral failure. Winter was not punishment. Descent was not defeat. Each was movement within pattern. If there is something enduring in this ancient imagination, it may be this gentle acceptance of movement. Nothing remains fixed forever. Not abundance, not sorrow, not certainty. But the flow between them continues. The shepherd grows older. The farmer's hands grow lined. The sailor's hair turns silver in salt wind. Yet the sky remains vast. The earth remains steady. The sea remains restless. And within each human life, the same sequence unfolds. Confusion, clarity, waiting, risk, descent, return, over and over, not as punishment, but as growth. The Greeks may have sensed that immortality was not the absence of death, but participation in enduring pattern. A single life passes, but rhythm continues. A single voice falls silent, but story adapts. A single temple crumbles, but orientation persists. This thought does not demand belief. It invites calm. For if we are part of rhythm, then uncertainty is not exile, it is transition. If we are part of cycle, then loss is not annihilation, it is interval. The shepherd resting beneath night sky does not know tomorrow's weather. The farmer storing grain does not know next season's yield. The sailor anchoring in quiet harbor does not know next voyage's outcome. Yet each rests, because rest does not require certainty. It requires trust in rhythm. The circle has almost closed now. We began with formless space. We traveled through division and order. We witnessed emotion testing structure. We watched fields fall silent and bloom again. We followed a soul through trial and descent. We observed symbols carved against fear. We saw stone erode and memory endure. And now we return not to chaos, but to openness. An openness no longer frightening, an openness understood as possibility. The night has deepened gently. The sea, imagined in distance, moves with softer sound. The hills, faint beneath stars, hold their quiet outline, and breath continues. Inhale, exhale. The circle closes not with noise but with stillness. And in that stillness there is enough, and in that stillness something else becomes visible. Not in the sky, not in stone, but within reflection itself. When I return to these ancient stories, I do not return to believe in thunder as a god, or in winter as the sorrow of a goddess. I return because the patterns feel honest. There is something deeply calming about a worldview that does not promise perfection, but instead promises rhythm. The Greeks did not suggest that life would become easier. They suggested that it would move. And movement, when understood, is less frightening than randomness. Perhaps that is what resonates most. The idea that chaos is not permanent, that even in confusion, form begins quietly to emerge. When I think of chaos in its earliest sense, not disorder but open space, I find that interpretation comforting. Open space is not something to fear, it is something that allows possibility. The shepherd standing beneath vast sky might have felt uncertainty, but he also felt room to breathe. The farmer wading through winter might have felt anxiety, but she also trusted eventual thaw. The sailor facing horizon might have felt risk, but he also felt invitation. These stories do not remove vulnerability, they dignify it. They suggest that uncertainty is part of belonging to the world, not a sign of being misplaced within it. Over time, I have come to appreciate this quiet realism. Nothing in Greek mythology remains fixed. Generations replace one another. Seasons cycle endlessly. Souls descend and return. Even gods experience tension and change. There is humility in that. No being, however powerful, escapes movement. And if movement is universal, then struggle is not personal failure. It is participation. Perhaps that is why the myth of Psyche lingers so strongly. She does not win through dominance. She learns through tasks, through sorting, through waiting, through accepting help, through descending and rising again. There is something profoundly human in that sequence. Clarity does not arrive instantly. Patience must be practiced. Depth must be faced. Curiosity sometimes overreaches, but return remains possible. When I consider these patterns, I do not see rigid theology. I see psychological insight expressed in story form. The shepherd watching the sky is learning emotional regulation. The farmer enduring winter is learning resilience. The sailor adjusting to wind is learning adaptability. The myth does not announce these lessons. It embodies them. And perhaps that embodiment is why the stories endure. They do not instruct directly. They illustrate. They allow us to recognize ourselves within ancient images, and recognition creates calm. When I imagine the circle we have traced, from chaos to cosmos, from cosmos to soul, from soul to symbol, from symbol to reflection, I do not feel closure in the dramatic sense. I feel alignment. Alignment with something cyclical, something patient, something that does not rush toward final answers. In a world that often demands immediacy, there is comfort in narratives that unfold slowly, that accept ambiguity, that allow winter to exist without panic, that allow dissent without declaring it defeat. Perhaps that is what I value most in these ancient imaginings. They normalize fluctuation. They treat change as natural, not catastrophic. They treat imperfection as expected, and in doing so they make human life feel less isolated. The sky above the shepherd is the same sky above us. The seasons that shaped the farmer's patience still shape ours. The horizon that humbled the sailor still humbles us. In that continuity there is quiet reassurance. Not that everything will be easy, but that everything will move. And movement, when cyclical, carries us forward even when we cannot see the full path. The night remains gentle. The breath remains steady. And reflection continues, not as argument, but as quiet companionship. As I sit with these stories a little longer, I begin to notice how different their rhythm feels from the rhythm of modern life. The Greeks told stories that unfolded slowly. Nothing resolved in an instant. Chaos did not become order overnight. Winter did not turn to spring in a single breath. The soul did not transform without trial. Everything required duration. And perhaps that is what feels unfamiliar to us now. We live in a world that accelerates. Information arrives immediately. Answers appear in seconds. Silence is rare. Waiting is uncomfortable. Yet these ancient myths seem to insist that waiting is not empty time. It is formative time. Demeter's grief was not rushed. It lasted through a season. Psyche's growth was not effortless. It unfolded through tasks, through missteps, through descent. Even Zeus, ruler of sky, did not inherit stability instantly. He passed through succession and conflict first. There is patience woven into every layer, and I find myself wondering whether that patience is what we quietly long for. Not slowness for its own sake, but reassurance that not everything must be solved immediately. The shepherd did not control the weather. He responded to it. The farmer did not force the seed to bloom. She tended and waited. The sailor did not command the horizon. He navigated within its uncertainty. There is humility in these roles, and humility softens anxiety. In modern life, we often feel responsible for controlling outcomes, for managing every variable, for predicting every shift. But the Greeks imagined a world where control was limited, where even gods felt tension, where cycles moved beyond individual will. Strangely, that limitation feels liberating. If winter is part of rhythm, then I do not need to interpret it as personal failure. If descent is part of growth, then confusion is not a sign that something is broken. If storms belong to the sky, then turbulence in life may belong to movement rather than mistake. These stories do not promise comfort, they offer perspective, and perspective often calms more deeply than reassurance. When I think of Psyche's final descent, I no longer focus on danger. I focus on return. The pattern never abandoned her. Even her error, opening what was sealed, did not end the story. It paused it. And that pause was followed by awakening. There is gentleness in that. Mistakes are not terminal. They are transitional. Perhaps that is what feels most restorative about revisiting these myths. They assume that humans will falter. They assume that seasons will shift. They assume that uncertainty will arise, and yet they also assume that rhythm continues. In a restless world, that assumption is grounding. We are not required to be flawless. We are invited to be responsive. We are not required to eliminate winter. We are invited to endure it. We are not required to avoid descent. We are invited to move through it. The shepherd's calm did not come from controlling thunder. It came from recognizing pattern. The farmer's peace did not come from abolishing frost. It came from trusting return. The sailor's steadiness did not come from flattening the sea. It came from adapting to its motion. Perhaps these ancient imaginations whisper something simple to us now. You do not need to outrun the cycle. You do not need to resolve every uncertainty tonight. You are allowed to move at the pace of seasons. You are allowed to breathe between tasks. You are allowed to descend without assuming permanence. The sky above us is still vast, the earth beneath us is still steady, and breath still moves without being forced. Inhale, exhale. If the Greeks taught anything enduring, it may be this quiet acceptance that life is rhythmic rather than linear. And rhythm, once trusted, becomes a source of rest. The night has grown deeper now, thoughts slow, edges soften, and somewhere within that slowing, the ancient stories settle not as legend, but as gentle reminder. Movement continues. Return follows descent. And you, like shepherd, like farmer, like sailor, are already part of the pattern. If these myths teach us anything, it may be this. Stability was never the absence of change. It was the ability to remain within change without losing orientation. The Greeks did not imagine a world without storms. They imagined a world where storms belonged. They did not imagine a life without winter. They imagined winter as a season with meaning. They did not imagine a soul without descent. They imagined descent as part of growth. And perhaps that quiet reframing is what endures most powerfully. Because when we remove meaning from difficulty, difficulty becomes chaos. But when we place difficulty within pattern, it becomes movement. I think that is why these stories still feel relevant. Not because we believe in Olympus as a literal mountain of gods, but because we recognize ourselves within the structure. We recognize the confusion that precedes clarity. We recognize the waiting that precedes renewal. We recognize the fear that precedes courage. We recognize the silence that precedes understanding. There is something deeply reassuring about a worldview that does not promise permanence. Permanent joy would feel unnatural. Permanent sorrow would feel unbearable. But alternating states, that feels familiar, that feels human. The shepherd never owned the sky. The farmer never controlled the earth. The sailor never mastered the sea. Yet each lived fully within their limitations. And in doing so, they found steadiness not in dominance but in alignment. If these myths offer guidance, it may be this subtle invitation toward alignment. To notice the season you are in. To accept that it will shift. To resist interpreting every winter as failure. To resist interpreting every storm as personal attack. To allow descent without assuming collapse. To allow return without demanding certainty. In a world that often measures success by control and speed, this perspective feels almost radical. The Greeks did not measure life by uninterrupted ascent. They measured it by participation in rhythm, chaos to order, order to tension, tension to cycle, cycle to growth, growth to descent, descent to wisdom, and wisdom not as final answer, but as deeper awareness of movement itself. Perhaps immortality was symbolic. Not endless existence, but enduring relevance of pattern. These stories remain because they describe something that has not changed. Human vulnerability. Human resilience. Human longing for orientation beneath vastness. If I take anything from them personally, it is permission. Permission to move more slowly. Permission to let clarity arrive gradually. Permission to rest between storms. Permission to trust that confusion is not permanent. The shepherd trusted dawn even in darkness. The farmer trusted spring even in frost. The sailor trusted shoreline even when hidden by fog. Trust did not remove risk. It allowed rest. And rest is not weakness. It is restoration. So if these myths teach us anything, perhaps it is this gentle truth. You are not outside the pattern. You are within it. Your uncertainty has seasons. Your clarity will return. Your descent is not exile. Your growth is not linear. And your breath, moving quietly in and out, is already participating in the oldest rhythm of all. Inhale, exhale. Above you, space remains vast. Beneath you, earth remains steady. Between them, you remain human. And that, perhaps, is enough. And now, the circle rests. The sky that once held thunder is quiet. The sea that once carried storm moves in softer rhythm. The earth that once hardened in winter lies steady beneath unseen roots. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. No descent must be completed, no season must be hurried forward. The ancient shepherd has long since closed his eyes. The farmer's field rests in darkness. The sailor's boat rocks gently in harbor, and you are simply breathing. Inhale, exhale. The stories have softened into pattern. The pattern has softened into awareness, and awareness has softened into stillness. Above you, the same vast sky that watched over ancient hills stretches without demand. Beneath you, the same steady earth that carried countless generations holds its quiet strength. Between them, your breath moves gently. There's nothing to chase, nothing to resolve, only rhythm, only cycle, only the slow turning of night into deeper night. If winter comes, spring will follow in its time. If storms gather, they will pass in their time. If confusion lingers, clarity will rise in its time. For now, rest within the pattern. Let the sky remain vast, let the earth remain steady, let the sea move without effort, and let your thoughts drift as softly as waves against distant shore. The circle has closed, the breath continues, and beneath the quiet sky, sleep arrives gently. The stories no longer need to explain themselves. They have already done their work. The sky is no longer a place of argument. It is simply wide. The sea is no longer something to conquer. It is simply moving. The earth beneath your feet is not demanding interpretation. It is steady, as it has always been. There was once thunder. There were once gods who argued. There were seasons that turned with drama. But now, none of that needs to be vivid. It can soften, it can blur, like distant mountains at dusk. What remains is quieter, the sensation of lying beneath something vast, the awareness of breath rising and falling, the understanding, not spoken, not analyzed, that movement continues without effort. You do not need to hold the pattern together. The pattern was never yours to maintain. Winter arrives without being summoned. Spring returns without being forced. Storms pass without permission, and clarity rises without being chased. The shepherd is resting. The farmer is resting. The sailor is resting. Not because everything is certain, but because rhythm is reliable. Above you, stars continue their quiet burning. They do not hurry, they do not announce, they simply remain. Below you, earth turns slowly through darkness. No sound marks its motion. No voice commands it forward. It moves anyway. Breath enters, breath leaves. Nothing else is required. If thoughts rise, let them move like wind over water. If images appear, let them drift like clouds across night sky. There is no task remaining, no descent left to complete, no lesson to remember. Only the steady rhythm that was present before story began. The vastness is no longer intimidating, it is spacious. Spacious enough for rest, spacious enough for silence, spacious enough for sleep to arrive without being noticed. The sky remains wide. The earth remains steady. The sea moves somewhere far beyond hearing, and breath continues, softly, slowly, naturally. The circle does not close with sound. It fades like starlight just before dawn, and in that fading rest deepens,